The morning in Brookside was serene. The sky gleamed a flawless azure, and the sidewalk outside the neighborhood cafe thrived with patrons savoring their early beverages. Among them, seated quietly at an outdoor table, was Daniel Mitchell, a visually impaired man who frequented the shop daily. Accompanying him was Titan, his steadfast German shepherd, standing watchful. Titan was more than just a service dog. His sturdy stance and authoritative demeanor were the results of extensive training as a former police K-9, now retired. Titan had committed his existence to safeguarding Daniel, providing not only guidance, but also a deep emotional bond that Daniel greatly valued. As Daniel enjoyed his coffee in tranquility, the thunderous roar of 3 motorcycles shattered the calm, pulling into a space near the cafe. The booming engines captured everyone's attention. 3 individuals dismounted, dressed in leather jackets embellished with bold insignias. They appeared nonchalant, yet their scrutinizing gazes added a layer of tension to the atmosphere. Jake, the group's leader, exuded authority with his booming, self-assured laughter. He animatedly gestured while conversing with his companions, asserting his dominance over the area. Titan, ever vigilant, perked his ears, detecting something amiss. The trio began to meander between the tables, observing the patrons as they went. Jake spotted Titan and Daniel, pausing momentarily to gaze at the German shepherd. "That's one hefty dog you've got there," he commented, his tone prompting Titan to meet his gaze. Laughing at his own remark, Jake leaned forward slightly, as if testing the dog's reaction. Titan remained still, yet his posture conveyed a silent warning, revealing his assessment of the situation. Perhaps seeking to prove a point, Jake exaggerated his gestures, feigning humor. "Is he really as intelligent as he seems?" he questioned his friends, who chuckled awkwardly. The tension in the air thickened. Titan stayed motionless, his eyes fixed on Jake. Unaware of the suspicious looks surrounding him, Daniel inquired, "Is everything all right?" His voice was calm, though tinged with unease, sensing the shift in Titan's behavior. The quiet at their table contrasted sharply with the surrounding chatter. Titan was a dog trained for high-stress scenarios, his experience teaching him to remain composed until the opportune moment. Realizing he hadn't elicited the response he desired, Jake retreated slightly, but his laughter resonated once more. Daniel, still oblivious to the unfolding drama, reached out to pet Titan. "You all right, buddy?" he asked softly. Titan moved slightly closer, but kept his gaze locked on Jake, who began to feel the repercussions of his actions. The mood in the small outdoor cafe area began to change. As Daniel finished his coffee, Jake and his group's laughter grew louder, now carrying a more provocative undertone. Titan remained beside Daniel, but anyone observant could discern his heightened alertness. His muscles were taut, and his eyes tracked Jake's every movement, anticipating what might come next. He wasn't merely a dog, he was a protector trained to defend at all costs. Jake, enjoying the attention, approached Daniel's table, seemingly unaware that other customers were watching. "You got a nice dog there, don't you?" he remarked playfully, though a trace of disdain lingered in his voice. Daniel offered a slight smile, attempting to diffuse the situation. "Thanks, Titan is my best friend." Jake tilted his head, feigning interest. "Titan, named after the Greek gods? Let's see if he lives up to the name." Before Daniel could respond, Jake swiftly reached out to touch Titan's snout. What might have appeared harmless to bystanders was enough to activate Titan's protective instincts. The German shepherd didn't lunge, but stepped back, emitting a low, warning growl. The surrounding tension intensified, and an uneasy silence enveloped the area. "Easy there, boy," Jake said, raising his hands as if joking, though a challenging glint sparkled in his eyes. Still perplexed by the situation, Daniel placed his hand on Titan's neck, attempting to soothe him. "Sorry if I startled you," he said earnestly. Jake merely laughed, his pride evidently bruised by the dog's reaction. He stepped back, but his friends began to tease him. "So, Jake, you're letting a dog put you in your place?" That single remark altered the dynamic. Determined to impress, Jake glanced back at Titan with a purposeful smile. Noticing that many onlookers were observing their interaction, some discreetly recording on their phones. Jake momentarily hesitated. However, he wasn't one to back down easily. "Relax, guys. It's just a dog," he dismissed casually. But Titan could discern the difference between playful behavior and genuine threat. Although Daniel couldn't see, he began to feel that something was off. "Titan, what's wrong?" he whispered. The German Shepherd maintained his fixed gaze on Jake, awaiting his next move. Jake took a few steps back, but it wasn't a sign of retreat. His friends continued to laugh, provoking him further and seemingly inflaming Jake's already wounded pride. He paused, staring intently at Titan, as if daring the dog to act. The air was thick with palpable tension. Unaware of the malicious intentions or the impending danger, Daniel tried to lighten the atmosphere with a comment. "He doesn't like it when people get too aggressive," he said, perhaps unnerved by the situation, but Jake disregarded his remark. He glanced around, seeking validation from his peers and the surrounding crowd for his forthcoming actions. With a cold smile, he stepped toward Titan, extending his hand once more. Titan, still seated, emitted a low growl, a clear caution to those who could interpret it. The sound was barely audible but potent enough to make onlookers uneasy. Jake seemed resolute in testing boundaries. "Come on, big guy," he said with a strained laugh. "Are you as tough as you look?" Before Titan could respond, Jake lightly tapped the side of Daniel's chair, prompting Titan to rise swiftly and firmly. That action was the final trigger for the dog. Titan didn't charge, but his demeanor shifted. He was fully alert, his body coiled like a bow ready to release. The surrounding crowd began to murmur, and some raised their phones to document the unfolding scene. Sensing the change in Titan's behavior, Daniel frowned, running his hand over the dog's neck in an attempt to calm him. "What's happening here?" he voiced aloud, concern etched on his face. Jake laughed again, though it was tinged with nervousness. Aware he was pushing boundaries, he struggled to maintain his composure in front of his friends and the crowd. "Nothing really," he replied, gesturing for Daniel to relax. "We're just having some fun." At that moment, a woman seated nearby stood up. "Hey, you need to stop this," she declared firmly, her voice carrying across the sidewalk. For the first time, Jake hesitated. Embarrassment washed over him as he noticed the disapproving stares from others. Titan remained still, eyes locked on Jake, ready to respond to any sign of danger. The tension lingered, almost as if the air was stretched thin, ready to snap. Jake narrowed his eyes at the woman confronting him but remained silent. The surrounding crowd began to feel uneasy, exchanging looks between Jake, Titan, and Daniel, who now appeared even more bewildered by the escalating discomfort. Jake took a step back, but it wasn't a full retreat. "Relax, we're just having fun," he reiterated dismissively, attempting to salvage his dignity. Inside, however, he felt the urge to reassert his dominance. Titan, on the other hand, continued to observe every movement with meticulous precision, as if anticipating Jake's next move. Daniel tightened Titan's leash, murmuring, "Titan, calm down. What's going on?" He couldn't see Jake's threatening posture, but he could sense the mounting tension in the air. Titan wasn't an ordinary dog. He had been trained to protect, and at that moment, he was fully on alert. Daniel trusted him implicitly, but the growing unease made him apprehensive. The crowd around them seemed immobilized by a heavy silence, amplifying the unsettling atmosphere. Suddenly, Jake made a swift move. Pretending to back off, he impulsively kicked a nearby chair, pushing it toward Titan. The clatter of metal against the ground echoed down the street, eliciting gasps of surprise from some bystanders. Titan reacted immediately, sidestepping the chair with remarkable agility. The dog growled more audibly, his protective stance becoming unmistakably clear. It was an unequivocal warning that he would no longer tolerate any further provocation. "Hey, stop," the woman shouted again, this time with increased authority. A few others began to speak up, urging Jake to cease his actions. However, Jake seemed ensnared by his own ego. "What's the problem? You've never seen someone interact with a dog before?" he retorted, attempting to maintain a carefree facade. Yet, his clenched fists betrayed his loss of control over the situation. Titan stood his ground, eyes unwaveringly fixed on Jake as if analyzing every move, ready to act if necessary. Daniel finally comprehended the gravity of the situation. He slowly rose, his hand gripping Titan's leash firmly. "Can someone explain what's happening here?" he called out, his concern now evident. Before anyone could respond, Jake stepped forward, leaning toward Daniel in a bid to intimidate him directly. The crowd held its breath as Titan, understanding the threat to his owner, lowered his head slightly, preparing to defend Daniel at all costs. The tension peaked as Jake advanced another step toward Daniel. His proximity became oppressive, even to someone who couldn't see him. "What's wrong, buddy? Hiding behind your dog?" Jake mocked with a bitter laugh, masking his own discomfort. Daniel remained composed, though his voice quivered slightly. "Titan never shields me from anything," he replied, gripping the leash tightly. "He's here to protect me, and it seems like he knows something I don't." Titan stayed motionless, but the growl in his throat intensified with each passing second. The surrounding crowd, initially hesitant, began to murmur louder, visibly uncomfortable with Jake's behavior. An older gentleman seated at a nearby table finally stood up and intervened. "Hey, this has gone too far. You should leave before things escalate," he advised. However, Jake, fueled by pride and the pressure from his friends, disregarded the counsel. He regarded the man as just another obstacle, but the unease on his face became apparent. Suddenly, an unexpected sound broke the silence. Titan barked loudly, a deep, resonant bark that caused Jake to instinctively step back. It was a sound that demanded attention, its meaning unmistakable. The dog was prepared to act. The crowd reacted with surprise. Some continued filming, while others took a step back. The energy in the area shifted dramatically. Daniel, noticing Titan's bark, realized that something serious was unfolding. "Titan, it's all right. I'm okay." He attempted to soothe the German shepherd, but Titan maintained his unwavering gaze on Jake, as if conveying distrust. In a final bid to preserve his reputation, Jake impulsively moved forward, attempting to shove Daniel by the shoulder. It was a swift action, but not swift enough to escape Titan's notice. The German shepherd reacted in an instant, positioning himself between Jake and Daniel with a decisive move that placed him directly in the path of the biker and his owner. Titan didn't attack, but stood resolute, teeth slightly bared, a clear indication that this confrontation needed to end immediately. The street descended into complete silence. Jake froze, unable to respond as Titan's piercing gaze bore into him. Daniel, now fully aware of the severity of the situation, lifted his head and stated firmly, "I think it's best if you leave now." The surrounding crowd began to murmur, this time turning against Jake. Realizing he had lost control, Jake glanced around, attempting to mask his embarrassment. Without another word, he slowly backed away, trying to conceal his discomfort. His friends followed in silence, and within moments, the group disappeared around the corner. The morning, which had commenced with the gentle rhythms of routine, was now charged with murmurs and unease. Daniel sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Even without sight, he could feel that the energy had altered. The sound of distant motorcycles dwindled, replaced by the subdued chatter of people discussing what they had witnessed. Titan remained by Daniel's side, alert and tense, but there was an additional layer, a subtle trembling in his front paws. Daniel, feeling the vibration through the leash, crouched down and touched Titan's fur. "Titan, it's all right now, buddy," he murmured, attempting to calm him. However, Titan hesitated, his gaze still fixed on the spot where Jake had vanished, as if recognizing that the man wasn't just a fleeting threat, but a potential recurring problem. Gently touching Titan's snout, Daniel whispered, "You sense something I don't you?" These simple words carried profound significance, reflecting the unwavering trust he had in his loyal companion. The crowd around them began to disperse slowly, though a few remained nearby, intrigued. The woman who had confronted Jake took a few steps toward Daniel, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" she inquired, her voice still trembling from adrenaline. Daniel nodded, but the worry was evident in his furrowed brows. "I'm fine, but Titan, He's never acted like this before. He knows when something's wrong, and that concerns me. The woman crouched down, observing Titan closely. This dog, he's not ordinary, is he? Daniel sighed, a blend of pride and melancholy on his face. No, he was a K9 trained to protect, serve, and if necessary, sacrifice everything. But that was years ago. I believed he had left all that behind. Now he's my guide, my family. The woman peered into Titan's eyes, attempting to decipher something only the dog could understand. Maybe he never forgot who he is, she whispered. The older man who had intervened earlier stepped closer. Listen, son, he began, his voice deep and filled with wisdom. Dogs like him have instincts that go beyond what we can comprehend.
He didn't react like that by chance.
You should trust him and stay alert. That man, Jake, doesn't seem like the type to give up easily. The stranger's words resonated with Daniel, who gently tightened Titan's leash. The German shepherd looked at him, his eyes conveying emotions words couldn't capture. Just then, a distant sound interrupted the moment. The rumble of engines. They were no closer, but they hadn't entirely vanished either. Daniel took a deep breath, stroking Titan's head. Maybe it's just my imagination, he mused, but the tremor in Titan's body suggested otherwise. Unbeknownst to Daniel, this incident was merely the beginning of something far more significant, something that would challenge not only Titan's loyalty, but also Daniel's resilience in facing the unforeseen. The tension appeared to subside, but not for Titan. Though he was now lying beside Daniel, his breathing remained rapid, his eyes vigilant of every movement around them, sensing the dog's unease. Daniel decided it was time to leave the cafe. He grabbed the leash and rose slowly, offering a nervous smile to the few lingering patrons. Thanks for staying, he said. I think Titan and I need some fresh air. He began walking down the sidewalk. The walk back home was a routine for Daniel and Titan, but that morning, each step felt laden with significance. The silence was only interrupted by the sound of Titan's paws on the pavement and the gentle jingle of the leash. Daniel couldn't see his surroundings, but Titan's behavior spoke volumes. He was tense, his posture indicating that he was on high alert, a subtle yet constant reminder that something was still amiss. Upon arriving at Daniel's modest apartment, he unclipped the leash, allowing Titan to move freely within the space. You're acting strange today, buddy, Daniel remarked as he fumbled with the kitchen counter to fetch Titan's water bowl. The German shepherd moved deliberately through the apartment, sniffing every corner as if conducting a thorough inspection. Finally, he settled by the door, sitting quietly with his ears perked, listening intently for any sounds from outside. Daniel noticed this, furrowing his brow. What's going on, Titan? You never do this. As Daniel sat on the couch, trying to process the morning's events, he began recalling the stories he'd heard about Titan before adopting him. He knew Titan had a history as a K9, but he hadn't delved into the specifics. Titan had been involved in challenging cases where his ability to detect danger had saved lives, and now it seemed those instincts were resurfacing. Are you trying to tell me something, boy? Daniel asked, petting the dog's soft fur. Titan only gave a slight wag of his tail, but his eyes remained fixed on the door outside. The distant rumble of a motorcycle echoed once more, almost imperceptibly. Titan lifted his head, his entire body tensing again. Daniel didn't hear the sound, but he felt Titan's reaction. He placed a hand on Titan's shoulder as he always did to offer comfort. Whatever it is, we're in this together, he whispered softly. Little did Daniel know that promise would soon be tested in ways he could never have anticipated. The evening descended quietly, enveloping the small neighborhood in a blanket of calm. Daniel sat at his simple dining table, carefully slicing an apple as Titan rested beside him. The lingering tension from earlier hung in the room, a silent weight that neither Daniel nor Titan could dismiss. Daniel's fingers brushed against Titan's fur as he spoke almost to himself. Maybe I'm just overthinking this, huh, buddy? He murmured. Titan's ears twitched, his keen eyes fixed on the front door, as if he anticipated something. Daniel couldn't see outside, but the tranquility was shattered by the distant hum of engines. Initially faint, the sound grew louder and more distinct. Titan immediately stood, his body rigid as he stared intently at the door. Sensing the change, Daniel froze. "What is it, Titan?" he asked, his voice steady yet filled with concern. The engine abruptly stopped, followed by a heavy silence that pressed against the thin walls of the apartment. Daniel reached for his phone, his fingers trembling slightly. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, though his heart raced in his chest. Moments later, a knock echoed through the apartment, sharp and deliberate. Titan emitted a low growl, positioning himself between Daniel and the door. Daniel hesitated before standing, his hand gripping Titan's leash tightly. "Who is it?" he called out, his voice firm but wary. There was no immediate response, only the sound of faint murmurs outside. Daniel's pulse quickened as he felt Titan's tension through the leash, the dog's readiness to defend if necessary. "I'm not opening the door until you say who you are," Daniel declared. Finally, a voice responded, deep and vaguely familiar. "Calm down, man. It's just me, Jake." The words sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Titan barked sharply, his growl deepening. Daniel's grip tightened on the leash as he stepped back, creating more distance from the door. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. Jake's tone shifted, attempting to sound casual, but the underlying menace was unmistakable. "Just wanted to talk, man. No hard feelings from earlier, right?" Daniel didn't respond immediately. His mind raced, weighing his options. Titan, sensing the gravity of the situation, remained poised and alert.
The Sile.
NC stretched as Daniel felt the weight of Jake's presence just beyond the door. "You need to leave," Daniel finally stated, his voice steady but resolute. The murmurs outside grew louder, accompanied by the sound of retreating footsteps, but Titan didn't relax. Neither did Daniel. Something about the encounter felt unresolved, like a storm gathering strength just beyond the horizon. The uneasy silence following Jake's departure was short-lived. Daniel paced the living room, his fingers trailing lightly along the familiar contours of the furniture as he attempted to steady his thoughts. Titan, however, was restless. He moved to the window, his large frame tense as he sniffed the air and stared into the night. "What is it, Titan?" Daniel asked, more to himself than to the dog. The unease in his chest intensified, a growing certainty that Jake wasn't finished with whatever game he was playing. Minutes later, the sound of footsteps broke the quiet. They were muffled and deliberate, circling the perimeter of the apartment building. Titan let out a sharp bark, his body coiled like a spring. Daniel froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached for the phone on the counter, his fingers fumbling to dial 911. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, though every nerve in his body screamed otherwise. Titan moved to stand by the door, his growl low and steady, a warning that reverberated through the small apartment. Daniel connected with the emergency dispatcher, his voice shaking as he explained the situation. "There's someone outside my apartment," he said, gripping Titan's leash tightly as the dog's growls grew louder. "I think they mean trouble." The dispatcher assured him that officers were on their way, but the minutes felt like hours. Outside, the footsteps grew closer, more deliberate, followed by the sound of something scraping against the window pane, a subtle, menacing noise that sent chills down Daniel's spine. The scraping halted abruptly, succeeded by a muffled curse from outside. Titan barked again, this time louder, his body pressed against the door as if daring the intruder to come closer. Daniel, his grip firm on Titan's leash, backed into the corner of the room, his mind racing. He felt helpless, relying on Titan's instincts and hoping that help would arrive in time. "We're coming, Titan," he murmured, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Just hold on." Finally, the faint wail of police sirens pierced the tense air. The footsteps outside ceased immediately, followed by the sound of someone running away. Titan remained on high alert, his growl softening but not entirely disappearing. Daniel exhaled shakily, gripping the phone as he whispered into the receiver. "They're here. Thank you." Relief washed over him momentarily, but it was tinged with the realization that this wasn't over. Jake had crossed a line, and Daniel knew he needed to brace himself for whatever was to come next. The flashing red and blue lights bathed the street in an eerie glow as two police officers approached Daniel's apartment. Titan, still alert, stood by the door, ears perked and body rigid. Daniel opened the door cautiously, feeling the rush of cool night air against his face. "Officers, thank you for coming," he said, his voice steady despite the lingering fear in his chest. Titan didn't relax, his sharp eyes darting toward the shadows outside, as if sensing that danger still lurked. The officers asked Daniel to recount everything, taking notes as he described the earlier confrontation with Jake and the ominous sounds around his apartment. He didn't take any physical actions, Daniel admitted, gripping Titan's leash tightly. "But he's unpredictable, and I know he'll come back." One officer knelt down to pet Titan, though the dog remained on edge, his gaze fixed on the perimeter. "Your dog's instincts are sharp," the officer remarked. "If he's this agitated, you're right to be cautious." As the officers swept the area, they discovered fresh footprints near Daniel's window but found no sign of Jake or his friends. "He's probably long gone," one of them suggested, though their tone lacked conviction. They advised Daniel to stay inside, keep his phone close, and call if anything else happened. "We'll increase patrols in the area," the other officer assured him. "But if you feel unsafe, don't hesitate to leave for the night." Daniel nodded, though he had no intention of leaving. This was his home, and he wasn't about to let Jake take that away from him. After the officers departed, the apartment felt heavier with silence. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, Titan lying at his feet, still watchful. He reached down to stroke the dog's back, the familiar motion grounding him. "I don't know what's coming next, Titan," he murmured, "but I know you'll be ready." Titan's ears flicked at the sound of his voice, and for the first time that evening, his tail gave a faint wag, a small moment of reassurance amidst the uncertainty. Daniel finally drifted off to sleep, though it was fitful and restless. Titan, ever vigilant, remained by the door, his body serving as a protective barrier between Daniel and the outside world. The bond between them had never felt stronger, forged in the crucible of shared fear and trust. Whatever Jake planned, Daniel knew one thing for certain. He wasn't facing it alone. Titan was more than a guide dog or a former K9. He was a guardian, a partner, and a testament to the strength that arises from standing together.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.